Picture this. A routine medical checkup. A chess genius walks in, and never walks out again. This is the story of Bobby Fischer, a man whose brilliance became his prison, and whose paranoia became his executioner. In the heart of Chicago, on a cold March morning in 1943, destiny took its first breath in the form of Robert James Fischer. But destiny, as we'll learn, can be both gift and curse wrapped in the same beautiful, terrible package. His mother, Regina, a Polish Jewish refugee fleeing the gathering storm clouds of war, had made an impossible choice. Pregnant, alone, carrying young Joan in her arms and Bobby in her womb, she abandoned everything familiar in Moscow and crossed an ocean toward an uncertain American dream. His father, Hans Gerhard Fischer, remained a ghost across the Atlantic, a man who would remain forever absent from the boy who would one day conquer kings. Regina Fischer was a woman of fierce determination in desperate circumstances. Homeless at Bobby's birth, she hustled through jobs across multiple states like a chess piece herself, always moving, always calculating the next survival move. Her spare time, devoted to communist activism, leaving young Bobby and Joan to navigate childhood largely alone. But then came 1949. Bobby was just 6 years old when his mother made what seemed like an innocent purchase, a children's chess set. Joan glanced at it, played briefly, then moved on to other childhood pursuits. Bobby stared at those 32 pieces and saw something that would consume his soul for the rest of his life. The transformation was immediate and total. While other children played with toys, Bobby studied chess with the intensity of a scholar. His mother, worried about his isolation, placed an advertisement seeking chess partners his own age. The newspaper never ran the ad, but they forwarded it to Hermann Helms, the so-called dean of American chess. Helms recognized something extraordinary brewing in this 7-year-old boy and invited Bobby to a simultaneous exhibition featuring chess champion Max Pavey. There, in front of a growing crowd of amazed spectators, little Bobby held his ground for 15 minutes against a master, a feat that should have been impossible. Carmen Nigro, president of the Brooklyn Chess Club, witnessed this display and immediately took the prodigy under his wing. For years, Bobby studied under various mentors, but when he turned 13, something explosive happened. His talent didn't just grow, it detonated. In the summer of 1956, Bobby became the youngest ever junior champion. But his first brush with immortality came that October in New York City, when he faced international master Donald Byrne, a man 13 years his senior and infinitely more experienced. What happened next is still analyzed and marveled at today. In a move so audacious it bordered on madness, the 13-year-old Fischer sacrificed his queen, chess's most powerful piece, and then proceeded to slice through Byrne's defenses like a hot knife through butter. The tournament erupted. The chess world gasped. This wasn't just a victory, it was artistry in motion, forever dubbed the game of the century. But Fischer's response? Pure, devastating humility. I just made the moves I thought were best. I was just lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it. By 1957, Bobby Fischer was a household name among American chess enthusiasts. At 14, he earned the rank of master, the youngest ever to achieve this milestone. Months later, he conquered the U.S. Championship, again becoming the youngest victor in history. Fischer was no longer just playing chess, he was rewriting its possibilities. But with each victory, with each record shattered, something darker began brewing beneath the surface. When Bobby Fischer focused on something, everyone around him needed to brace for impact. His next obsession? The Soviet Union, that chess-producing juggernaut that had complicated connections to his family's history. In a move that perfectly captured his all-or-nothing personality, he convinced his mother to write directly to Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev, begging for an invitation to enter the country. When that failed, Fischer did something so bizarre it bordered on genius. He appeared on the American game show I've Got a Secret and parlayed his television appearance into round-trip tickets for himself and Joan to Moscow in 1958. Within hours of landing on Soviet soil, everyone involved began to regret the decision. Bobby immediately threw a tantrum, demanding to be taken to the Moscow Central Chess Club without delay. Once there, he systematically destroyed 2 of the club's top players in speed chess. As one witness noted, he crushed almost everyone who crossed his path. But crushing mere mortals wasn't enough for Bobby Fischer. He demanded to play Mikhail Botvinnik, the reigning world chess champion. When told this was impossible, he asked for Paul Keres, another highly ranked player. Again, the answer was no. Fischer's response was as predictable as it was devastating. Like a spoiled child denied his favorite toy, he sneered that he was tired of these Russian pigs, right in front of his hosts. To make matters worse, Soviet agents monitoring their guest discovered a postcard he'd written. I don't like Russian hospitality and the people themselves. The comments reached Russian newspapers, creating an international incident. Bobby and Joan quickly relocated to Yugoslavia, where Bobby played more publicized matches while getting out of Moscow's increasingly unwelcoming embrace. Just past his 15th birthday, Fischer achieved another impossible milestone. He became the youngest grandmaster in history. 6 months later, he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. The moment he turned 16, Bobby Fischer dropped out of high school. His reasoning was characteristically blunt: you don't learn anything in school. But Fischer wasn't abandoning education, he was revolutionizing it. With laser focus, he taught himself multiple foreign languages, including Russian, for the sole purpose of reading chess publications from around the globe. Every moment, every breath, every heartbeat was dedicated to chess mastery. In 1960, at a tournament in Buenos Aires, Fischer recorded a rare competitive failure. For someone accustomed to dominance, this loss would have been humiliating, leaving the entire chess world wondering if the boy wonder had lost his magic touch. The truth, according to his competitors, was far more human and far more salacious. At 17, Fischer was a sharp dresser full of teenage hormones, and according to fellow players, he had his first intimate experience with a woman during the tournament. The distraction, they claimed, contributed to his downfall. Fischer's response was both heartbreaking and prophetic. He reportedly promised himself he would never again mix women and chess, a vow that at least one person close to him swears he kept for the rest of his life. Another stumble came in 1962 at the candidates tournament in Curaçao, where Fischer finished 4th out of 8 despite being the favorite. This time, Fischer had an explanation that revealed his growing paranoia. He claimed the tournament's Soviet players had colluded to prevent his victory. But then came the perfect storm. In the 1963-64 U.S. Championship, Fischer achieved something that remains unmatched to this day. He won every single game, recording an 11-0 perfect score. Only about 10 perfect scores have ever been recorded in high-level chess competition, and Fischer's remains the only one in U.S. Championship history. Now, he was ready for the Soviets. In 1971, Fischer faced Soviet grandmaster and concert pianist Mark Taimanov in the quarterfinals of the candidates' matches. The Soviets were desperate not to lose to the American who had insulted them so thoroughly years before. Taimanov spent hours studying a comprehensive Soviet dossier on Fischer's playing style, supported by teams of analysts in preparation. No one could have predicted the brutality that followed. By the 5th game out of their 6-game match, Fischer had won the previous 4 sessions. The atmosphere was suffocating with tension. Taimanov had arrived with 2 seconds, both grandmasters themselves. Fischer? He was utterly alone, finding it both hilarious and humiliating that his opponent needed such extensive assistance. The final score, Fischer 6, Taimanov 0. The Soviet government's response was swift and merciless. They removed Taimanov from the national chess team, stripped away his government stipend, and banned him from international travel for 2 years. Bobby Fischer's personal Cold War was escalating into something approaching total warfare. Which brings us to 1972, the year that would define Bobby Fischer's legacy forever. The World Chess Championship between Fischer and defending Soviet champion Boris Spassky wasn't just a chess match, it was the Cold War played out on a 64-square battlefield. Fischer had gained a reputation as the Einstein of chess, and he was more than happy to embrace the role of demanding genius. His diva requirements grew exponentially. He refused to play in Spassky's chosen location of Reykjavik until the prize money was increased. He demanded that the championship use one specific Staunton chess set manufactured by Jacques of London. No substitutes would be acceptable. Fischer prepared for this ultimate battle like a warrior training for the fight of his life. He focused intensely on physical fitness, frequently playing tennis, swimming, and practicing boxing, all to sharpen his mental edge for the chessboard confrontation ahead. Due to the ongoing Cold War tensions, this match between the American Fischer and Soviet Spassky became a global media sensation. As one commentator noted, "It's been a long road for Fischer to this game, and it'll be a long match at the end of that road." Both he and Spassky have to play up to 24 games. The match could last up to 2 months. Each game runs up to 5 hours, the most intellectually exhausting battle known to the mind of man. The match began disastrously for Fischer. He lost the first 2 games, the second by forfeit. His reason for forfeiting raised serious concerns. Despite seeming to enjoy media attention outside the game room, Fischer now claimed the gaming conditions inside, with cameras in every corner, were distracting him. Throughout this period, Fischer was erratic and, according to friends, not very coherent. His paranoia reached new heights as he became convinced that the Icelandic Chess Federation was a communist front conspiring against him. With the match score at 2-0 favoring Spassky, it appeared Fischer might abandon the match entirely and flee Iceland. At this critical moment, reportedly, U.S. National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger personally called Fischer, encouraging him to stay in the match for America's sake. Fischer agreed, but with one final demand: the third game must be played in a private backroom, away from all cameras. Spassky, not wanting to win by default, agreed to this unusual request. From that third game forward, everything changed. Fischer staged one of the greatest comebacks in competitive history, displaying a newfound confidence that seemed to emerge from the privacy of that backroom. After the 21st game, he was declared the victor, becoming the 11th world chess champion and an instant American hero. But victory, as Fischer would discover, can be the cruelest prison of all. After winning the world championship, Bobby Fischer began changing in deeply disturbing ways. He retreated from the spotlight completely, playing no competitive matches for the next 3 years. When pushed to defend his title against rising challenger Anatoly Karpov in 1975, Fischer made increasingly unreasonable demands about the match format. FIDE, chess's international governing body, agreed to meet some but not all of his requests. For Fischer, partial accommodation wasn't enough. He refused to compete and forfeited his world championship title by default to Karpov. The 1972 World Championship had been both the best and worst thing to ever happen to Bobby Fischer. Having nothing left to prove, he began systematically cutting himself off from the world. For the next 20 years, he didn't play a single competitive game. Grandmaster Peter Biases, who played against Fischer privately countless times during this period, walked away feeling confused and disturbed. He was too good. He honestly believed there was no one for him to play, no one worthy of him. I played him, and I can attest to that. In 1988, Fischer entered a relationship with German chess player Petrus Stadler after his former opponent Boris Spassky introduced them. The relationship lasted 2 years, but ended with what Fischer must have felt was the ultimate betrayal. In 1995, Stadler published a tell-all book about him, Bobby Fischer, How He Really Is. In 1992, Fischer finally agreed to emerge from his 20-year isolation to play Spassky in a revenge match in Belgrade, Yugoslavia. There was one enormous problem. The country was under UN sanctions, and the US government made it crystal clear that Fischer's participation would be illegal. They sent him an official order not to participate. During the first press conference for the match, Fischer stunned the room into absolute silence with a single, defiant act. He spat on the US government's order in front of everyone present. Fischer went on to win the match against Spassky, proving his genius remained intact after decades of inactivity. But the US government made good on their threats, issuing a warrant for his arrest effective the moment he finished the match. Bobby Fischer fled first to Budapest, then to the Philippines. The greatest chess player in American history was now officially a fugitive. In 2002, the Philadelphia Inquirer published an explosive investigative report suggesting that Fischer's real father wasn't Hans Gerhard Fischer, but rather Hungarian mathematician and former child prodigy Paul Nemenyi. This brilliant man had likely had an affair with Bobby's mother in 1942, showed interest in Bobby's upbringing, and paid child support until his death in 1952. After 2 years in the Philippines, Fischer moved to Japan. On July 13, 2004, while attempting to board a flight back to the Philippines, Japanese authorities arrested him at the airport on behalf of the US government. Fischer described being placed in a windowless, smoke-filled cell where he didn't see natural light for days at a time. The experience drove him to re-evaluate his life completely. From prison, on September 6, 2004, he married his partner, chess player Miyoko Watai. Terrified of being extradited to the United States, Fischer sent a desperate letter to the government of Iceland requesting citizenship. Eventually, this was granted by the Icelandic government, partly in gratitude for his 1972 match with Spassky that had put their small nation on the global map. Fischer was determined to live out his remaining years in reclusive peace. But his legacy had become impossibly complicated. Despite his own Jewish heritage, Fischer had become virulently anti-Semitic over time, engaging in paranoid conspiracy theories that grew increasingly disturbing and hateful. The boy who had once been America's chess hero had transformed into something unrecognizable. By the end of 2007, Fischer was only 64 years old but suffering from degenerative kidney failure. On January 17, 2008, Bobby Fischer died in Iceland. And it was entirely his own fault. Originally, he had only a urinary tract blockage, a condition that should have been easily treatable. But Fischer, consumed by the very paranoia that had haunted him for decades, refused surgery and even refused to take medication. The greatest chess mind in American history died because he couldn't trust anyone enough to accept help. He was buried in a small Christian cemetery near an Icelandic village, having spent over 15 years in exile from his homeland, a brilliant, troubled genius who had conquered the world only to lose himself in the process. Bobby Fischer's story is ultimately a tragedy of what happens when exceptional talent meets untreated mental illness, when genius becomes indistinguishable from madness, and when the very gifts that elevate us can ultimately destroy us. In the end, Bobby Fischer didn't just play chess, he lived it, breathed it, and died by it. And perhaps, in some strange way, that was exactly the ending this singular, impossible man would have chosen for himself.